First up, we have Chris Bridges. So Chris leads the onboard data handling research group within Surrey Space Centre. He's got 20 years of delivering flight missions, payloads, software and teaching and key skills with academic, industry and government partners across the UK and the EU. He is a new dad and has not slept. Please be kind to him if he stares off into space.
Yes, so thanks very much for the introduction. My name is Chris Bridges and I'm here to talk to you today about what I've been doing, encroachment of AI into our world of education. And importantly, as Ian said, how we can use that as an opportunity, how we can then think about how we go about assessing them, knowing that they can use these tools whether or not you like it or not. Okay? They'll do it in front of your face, they'll do it in different ways. And actually they have some really interesting behaviours as to whether or not they actually know how to use these tools, or whether or not they're just like, oh, I've got access to this thing, I'll just ask you questions and use it like Google++, if you will. In particular, I'm interested in sandboxing because I teach a class called Spacecraft Avionics, and one of the skills that I teach in that is around coding. So I'm interested in that, how I manage the assessments, how I can manage those exploitation services, and what the practical mitigations I might have. There's a TLDR at the bottom, too long, didn't read. Can't ban it, why try? You can sandbox things as well, and to control kind of your execution environment as well. You can give yourself plenty of variance in there, or give the students scope, because what they really usually need to do is they need to cross some boundaries to get to the level where you need them to be for basic skills. And then the question is how do you push them? So for those that can, for those that want to, how do you get them to use those tools to then accelerate their own learning as well? And that's really good because it doesn't just come from a book, Google, a website, something like that. These tools can actually do what we need to do as well, because they don't turn up to tutorials anymore, do they? No. We want to be able to assess all these things. So, very brief overview of what the assignment does. Essentially, they are learning how to use cross-compilation tools to write code for flight computers. Okay? But I have physicists, aeronautical, mechanical, as well as electronic engineers in here, as well as computer science ones. So there are students with very, very varied levels of capability. Some of the students can just kind of get an idea on how to code some things. Okay? And so the question is we need to be able to teach them how to use tools. What do the tools do? What do they mean? What is the appropriate use of them? I also want them to get them to do some profiling, get them to understand and get a feel for what these different tools can do and what different computers can do. Okay? So if you were to look at the Mars rover and you say, oh, wonderful, it runs a Leon 3 at a whopping 250 megahertz, ladies and gentlemen, that can't do a lot. Okay? You can do a lot of things depending on if you program parts of the FPGA, but realistically, it's not going to be able to behave and act like a desktop computer, a laptop, even a Raspberry Pi, just orders of magnitude less compute. And then I get them to do a basic task, which is error correction. One of the things we do a lot in our computers is we do error correction, error checking, as well as converting things. So I get them to write a bit of code. What I do though is I get them to do that in a framework. So I've written quite a large framework together with my research group. Shout out to Sam Lane down the camera, who's really helped kind of accelerate some of this activity so that they can then demonstrate how to make things work. Finish. As we're doing that, I'm also then getting them to integrate things with modern software practices, so GitLab continuous integration practices. What this essentially means is that they can use a website to then do the whole assignment. They don't have to install any tools, they don't manage any configurations. I literally manage that whole environment. Okay? So there's a zero startup time for any of these students. You can see where I've used AI now, right? Those that have used it. This is really what I'm getting the students to do in reality. Is I have a Jetson Nano with some gaming memory associated to it, and I essentially have users connect to that and then write code that then runs on there as an emulator for a flight computer. But they can do it from anywhere. 24/7 access to the full tooling. This is the same tooling, the same compilers and simulators that are used by Airbus, NASA, ESA for running these flight computers. So code for code, bit by bit, this is kind of the tool if you're doing some of those types of missions. I've seen them use all of these tools. I thought, no one's ever coding on a phone. That's literally garbage. They do. Literally send them on their phone, just be like, change things, hitting commit, and what it will do is it will run a full pipeline and it will give them some instant feedback of what is happening with their activities. So we've created that framework. I manage that. Okay, this key kind of starting point in there. And one of the things that we want to focus on when I've thought about how we embed AI into these things are what are the processes that we're getting them to go through. Okay, so in most assignments you're like, do the thing, get the number. Really, that doesn't work so well in AI because it can generate a lot of stuff, especially if you're using a lot of mathematics, classic algorithms, it can just do it. So we have to change it to think about really the processes that we're using. What are the processes we want them to use? And how then are we going to get them to demonstrate their capability? And as I sort of broke this sort of down, and this is an assessment that I assume most universities do with all their assessments, is that you can use it in pretty much the whole area. Okay, whether or not they are running pieces of compilers, test harnesses, optimizing, literally you can use AI in almost all of it. And the real constraint here is how do I, as an assessor, kind of use that whilst maintaining then that they can then have an opportunity to use these tools. So with this code harnesses that I've written, we can then measure independently what's happening. So part of this is about me going, you can go wild, but you go wild just here. So knowing then, okay, that we're then managing those processes, I've kind of got three big areas that I get them to work with. Their own student area that they can edit themselves. I've got a measurement framework for them to measure what it is that they're doing, so they can get some instant feedback, we can get some testing associated with things, and then I've got a supporting framework, which is a whole bunch of tooling that can just help them in their learning, okay? And I'll show you what that means in just a sec. The sort of things that I get these pieces of tools to do will be things like this, where I can get them to know whether or not they've passed a test, whether or not something has run properly, whether the output is right or not. I use colour. Yes, it is in a terminal. Okay, I need to get them to using Linux-like systems. That's one of the skills that we also need. And then we can get them to then measure how fast things might go. Every year, what I do is I give them essentially a garbage jumbled up space image. I vary it every year, and it's essentially corrupted. I corrupt it with many hundreds of single event errors that simulates sort of bit flips in memory. And then I get them to correct it. And then I get them to correct it, but I also put other artifacts in there, things like multiple bit errors. And to know whether or not they can then make that leap in the thinking, to know whether or not things can work, because the algorithm doesn't always work. So with those sort of tools and things like that, it does give them then a framework to do what they want. They literally can just go in, use GPT, they pick their poison there, to then go and figure out how they're going to do that. And I'm in the lab with them, so if they want to use it, and they want to have a question, they can either ask me, or they can ask the tool. The worry is they kind of ask the tool, and the tool, as we've kind of figured out already, isn't always right. But it is actually doing, for sort of jobs related to C, a pretty good job at it. At the end of this assessment, okay, a student gave me this little video, and I assume it went on Instagram or whatever, the latest Snap, Talk, whatever they do it on, Facebook. And they gave me this video of how they use the tool, and I'm just going to play it for you now, because it's really interesting. Here's my assignment. He put music to it and everything. And I don't know whether or not he then went, keep making it better. No, just do more. Please, do more. Make it more. But it clearly had a massive impact on him. And it clearly had a massive impact on how he handled this particular assessment. This is one of my electronic engineering students, who knows that he course in 7 years. But it gave him something new. It gave him something, a place to explore, when he didn't necessarily know where to go and look. And as kind of Ian has previously said, that critical thinking, the knowing where to look, the knowing where to start, that's really where some of these tools can work with. I've seen students put stuff into those chat pieces, And it's gone, yeah, you just put that code in there, that's the stuff that you need to go in there, but then they're like, well, what's the stuff? Okay. So, you're like, you can ask me, ask that. It depends on how fast you want to accelerate things. One of the challenges I think we have with educators is we might have 10, 11, 12 weeks to teach them everything we might need to know about a certain topic. So anything I can do to kind of skip to the end or something to accelerate their learning is really useful. But this student really got something out of that. And it helped them then understand what the tools were doing, how the hardware and software interacted with each other. So from my point of view, I'm now thinking, okay, that's wonderful. If every student did that, okay, where do I go? And so I start to then think about, well, let me think about my sandbox again. Am I being too restrictive? Could I do something better? How do I then enable them to kind of keep going further? And students can do a lot of things in this case. Edit the bits that they need to edit. They can certainly optimize, add more functions. They can do a lot of stuff. But I don't ever get them to change the framework. Usually, that's what AI does. What students actually do is they just throw them the whole thing, and then it goes and edits the bit that you say, don't edit this. All these sort of small little nuances that we might talk about in person where you actually can get some key learning out of students. Some of that is kind of lost in translation there. So I think I need to do more work there to figure out how to best use this. I think these sort of slides I'll probably end up using in teaching as well, just so they get an idea on what the expectation is. Because I eventually say, look, I'm going to take that one file, I'm going to go and measure that, and then you're going to be able to understand how fast these things work, whether or not these work or not. But they always do these things. They will always try and do that, and those AI tools are always looking for the quick fix to go to the end. The real in-depth stuff, which is where you want those competencies to really exist that they will want in industry, doesn't always do them. Doesn't always do them. So what are they doing in this assignment? Well, yeah, the coding is a big part of that, but there's a big part of soft skills in here as well. In the report writing, how we communicate it, critical thinking, and how the algorithm can and should work with respect to the framework. So we have to kind of go back and go, well, what skills are they actually developing? How do they map to our accreditation? What guardrails do or should I have in these kind of settings? And these are kind of open questions to me, because I don't think if I went and talked to the IET and went, hey, where's the tick box here for you? What would you like to see and how you handle this? I'm not sure they really know at the moment. But I get to watch them use it. Okay? I get to watch them fumble about. I get to watch them real pro users go in depth. And then I'll go, so what does that actually do? Talk to me about that. And that's really the key message that I give my students, is when they're using these tools, how do you demonstrate the knowledge in your progression? Because really then, what we need to start thinking about is more about the process itself. That's kind of the big conclusion I've come to. I'm probably running short of time. How are we doing for time? 1 minute. Okay. Do the mitigations work in sandboxing? TLDR, yes. Okay. The sandboxing was really good. Me managing my own compute was really good. Students being able to get immediate feedback, 0 start time, that was all solid. Okay. Students really like that, and I've got really great feedback from this year's assessment. But I'm going to be continually figuring out myself how that stuff is going to fit in. Okay? Because if you're going to give a student a score in spacecraft avionics, where there needs no C and how compilers work and the interactions between hardware and interfaces, and I give them a score of 80, who am I really giving that score to? So they're going to go away, and in industry, they're going to sit in the job interview and go, hey, you got 80 in that. Tell me what you did. So there's going to be a conversation that needs to happen there as well around marking too. I don't have time to go through this. You'll have to do what James Master used to do, which is just take a screenshot of it. There are some things that I definitely need to look at more perhaps all wire components, AI declarations, perhaps even personalized tasks. Really add in automated variants in some of these systems so that no one is ever getting the same problem as well. There are things that I definitely don't want to do. as well. I'm not going to hide tests, test inputs. I'm not going to restrict access to the solutions. I really think that's counterproductive to what we're trying to teach. They need to know kind of really where the endpoints of some of these things are as well. AI detection of pages and devices is a big open thing. Good luck to anyone that's looking at that. So those are the things that I've been doing as a good case study, I think, in embedding AI into classes. I hope that sparks off some interest or discussion. Please tell me if I've got it completely wrong. Thank you very much.